How many times have you caught yourself thinking, I never expected things to turn out this way? Maybe it happened after a relationship ended, a career setback, or a decision that simply didn't lead where you hoped it would. In moments like these, it's easy to believe the pain comes entirely from what happened. But psychology points to something deeper. Very often, our suffering isn't caused by the event alone. It's created by the gap between the life we're living and the life we expected to be living. In other words, it's not reality itself that hurts us. It's the distance between reality and our expectations. Expectations are a natural part of being human. In fact, they're essential. Your brain is constantly trying to predict what comes next. It builds mental scenarios, plans for the future, and searches for a sense of certainty. This ability helps us make decisions, prepare for what's ahead, and navigate uncertainty. So the problem isn't that we have expectations. The problem begins when expectations quietly turn into certainty. When I hope this happens becomes this has to happen. When I'd really like this becomes this is how it should be. When we expect people to understand us without saying a word, believe life should always be fair, or think we're simply not allowed to fail. That's when expectations stop acting as a guide and start becoming a source of pressure. In psychology, this shift is often linked to rigid patterns of thinking, seeing the world through absolute rules like should, always, and never. The more these words dominate our inner dialogue, the more disappointed we become whenever reality refuses to follow those rules. Imagine a young graduate who's just finished university. They're convinced that within a few months they'll land the perfect job, become financially stable, and finally feel successful. But months go by. Interviews don't turn into job offers. Rejections begin to pile up. Slowly, self-doubt takes over. The situation itself is already difficult. But what makes the emotional pain even heavier is one simple thought. This shouldn't be happening to me. Now imagine someone else facing the exact same situation. Instead, they tell themselves, this is a difficult season, but it's part of the journey. I'll keep moving forward. The facts haven't changed. The situation is exactly the same. What changed is the interpretation. And that's one of the most important principles of modern psychology. Our emotions aren't shaped only by what happens to us. They're also shaped by the meaning we give to those experiences. That doesn't mean we can control everything. We can't. But we can learn to recognize the thoughts that make our suffering worse without actually reflecting reality. So maybe the first step isn't changing our lives. Maybe it's becoming aware of the expectations we've been carrying without even realizing it. Because many of those expectations aren't really ours. We inherited them from our families, our schools, society, social media, and the experiences that shaped us. And as long as we never question them, they'll continue shaping the way we see ourselves and the world around us. If we were born without any influence from the world around us, our expectations would probably look very different. But that's not how life works. None of us begins with a blank slate. From our earliest years, we start forming beliefs about how the world works, what success looks like, and what gives us value as human beings. According to cognitive psychology, our brains organize experiences into what's known as cognitive schemas, mental frameworks that help us make sense of the world. They're incredibly useful because they simplify reality, but when those frameworks are built on rigid or inaccurate beliefs, they can quietly create unrealistic expectations. Imagine a child who constantly hears, "You have to be the best," or a child who feels accepted only when they perform well. Without realizing it, they may grow up believing their worth depends entirely on their achievements. That belief doesn't disappear with age. It follows them into adulthood, into their career, their relationships, their family life, even into the way they see themselves. Every mistake stops feeling like just a mistake. Instead, it becomes proof that I'm not good enough. That's why two people can go through the exact same experience and walk away feeling completely different. They're not just reacting to what happened, they're reacting through the mental frameworks they've been building their entire lives. Today, another powerful influence shapes those expectations: social media. For the first time in history, we're comparing our lives with hundreds of people in just a few minutes. We see success, vacations, smiling faces, celebrations, perfect moments. What we rarely see are the doubts, the loneliness, the failures, and the struggles hiding behind those carefully chosen images. The problem is that our brains aren't always good at remembering we're only seeing a tiny part of someone else's reality. That's where the illusion begins. It starts to feel like everyone else is doing better. Everyone else is moving faster. Everyone else has life figured out. And somehow, we're the ones falling behind. That comparison can become emotionally exhausting because we're not just comparing achievements, we're comparing our entire sense of self worth to someone else's highlight reel. Slowly, our expectations drift further away from reality. We expect ourselves to succeed all the time, to never get tired, to never feel discouraged, to keep performing no matter what, to live up to standards that often aren't realistic or even human. But life doesn't move in a straight line. Growth isn't constant. There are seasons of progress and seasons that feel painfully slow. There are victories and there are failures. There are moments when we feel strong and moments when we need support. None of that is a sign of weakness. It's simply part of being human. So maybe the real question isn't whether we have expectations. The real question is whether those expectations help us grow or keep us trapped in the feeling that we'll never be enough. Because when you're chasing an ideal that doesn't actually exist, even your greatest achievements can start to feel small. And no matter how far you've come, it never feels like enough. Now let's take this one step further. What actually happens inside our minds when reality doesn't match our expectations? Psychology doesn't see thoughts as simple ideas. It sees them as mental patterns that shape the way we feel and behave. So when someone lives with constant, unrealistic expectations, it doesn't just affect their mood, it changes the way they see themselves. And eventually, the way they see the world. According to the cognitive model developed by Aaron T. Beck, we don't react directly to events. We react to the meaning we give them. And those meanings don't appear out of nowhere. They're built on deeper beliefs, beliefs that often operate automatically, without us even realizing it. Imagine someone experiences a setback. Instead of thinking, I didn't succeed this time, their mind immediately jumps to, I'm just not capable. I always fail. There must be something wrong with me. Notice what happened. A single event became a judgment about an entire identity. That's how the mind works when it's driven by unrealistic expectations. One mistake suddenly defines the whole person. Another influential psychologist, Albert Ellis, described something very similar. He believed many people live by what he called demanding beliefs, rigid internal rules like, I must always succeed. People should always understand me. Life shouldn't be this difficult. When these beliefs collide with reality, the result isn't just disappointment. It's emotional distress, stress, anxiety, frustration, sometimes even shame, or the painful feeling that somehow we're not enough. In other words, we don't suffer because life isn't perfect. We suffer because we expect it to be. If you pay close attention to your inner dialogue, you'll probably notice something. Most of the time, it isn't the situation itself that's causing the greatest pain. It's the sentence quietly repeating in your mind, "This shouldn't be happening." That simple thought sits at the heart of unrealistic expectations. And the more often we repeat it, the harder it becomes to accept reality for what it is. So the goal isn't to eliminate expectations altogether. That wouldn't be possible. And it wouldn't even be healthy. Expectations help us plan. They give us direction. They motivate us to grow. The real goal is to change our relationship with them, to transform them from rigid demands into flexible intentions, from "this has to happen" to "I'd really like this to happen," from "this must work out" to "I'll do my best and see where it leads." It sounds like a small change, but psychologically, it's a powerful one because that small shift brings us back to reality. And once we're grounded in reality, something important happens. There's room to breathe, room to make mistakes, room to learn, room to grow, room to simply be human without judging ourselves every step of the way. People with realistic expectations aren't less ambitious. They don't dream smaller, and they don't settle for less. They're simply more resilient. When life doesn't unfold the way they imagined, they don't fall apart because they never built their entire sense of worth on a single outcome. They've learned to see life not as a test they either pass or fail, but as a process, a journey that includes success, failure, growth, and uncertainty. And perhaps that's where a quieter kind of strength is found. Not in controlling everything, but in learning to remain steady, even when life refuses to be controlled.